Hi, everybody. It's Jean Humbrecht with Humbrecht Law, criminal and traffic defense attorney in Manassas, Virginia. Welcome to my semi-weekly local business spotlight. Today, I am joined by Chief Doug Keene from the Manassas City Police Department, and he is also the interim city manager. And I'm also joined by Lieutenant Brooks from the Manassas City Police Department. So they are joining us today to talk about a couple of things. One, April is Distracted Driving Awareness Month. So we're going to be talking about that. And then also a lot of people are interested in the new speed enforcement cameras and the red light cameras, which have been around for a while in the city of Manassas. So at this point, Chief Keene and Lieutenant Brooks, I'm going to turn it over to you just to kind of give an introduction, whatever it is that you want to say. And then I'm going to be sharing this video in my different Facebook groups, and then we'll just have a conversation. And I also invite anybody watching to type any questions or comments in the chat, and then we can ask the Chief and Lieutenant while we have them here today. So Chief and Lieutenant, I turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jean, for the kind introduction. That was a mouthful with all of the roles that I'm filling. This time we invited Lieutenant Andy Brooks with us. He is our supervisor that oversees the Special Operations Section, which also houses the traffic services, parking enforcement, photo red light, speed enforcement. So he's kind of our in-house expert in case we have any technical questions that comes up as well. Andy, do you have anything you would like to say?
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's definitely a pleasure to be here, and I look forward to some of the questions that we'll be getting today.
Okay, well, I am still in the process of sharing this on my Facebook page, but I am just going to start with questions. So first thing we want to talk about, Distracted Driving Awareness Month in April. Can you talk from your perspective about the amount of distracted driving you've seen, the texting while driving law, the new handheld device law, if that's cut down on any accidents? That's, again, kind of a mouthful, but if you could just kind of tell everybody about that and what the department is doing to cut down on that.
Sure. So when it comes to distracted driving, primarily, like you mentioned, is texting while driving. So in Virginia, that includes holding the telephone. So you can be holding it up to your ear, you can be holding it in your hand, on your lap, holding it up to look for directions on your GPS or whatever it may be. So you don't have to actually be texting or actively talking to somebody. Simply holding that phone, if you're using as a navigating device or something like that, having that in your hand is technically a violation. So that is the primary violation that we're seeing and the primary ticket that our officers have been issuing. So just to give you an idea, so far this year, the department has issued 102 citations for that alone. So that's fairly significant in just the first 4.5 months of the year. So unfortunately, that's also on pace for last year's numbers as well. So we're not really seeing a decline in that. And I'm sure all of us have seen it driving, whether it's personal time, going to work, whatever it may be, seeing somebody holding their phone. It may seem innocent and innocuous really at first, but it is a cause of accidents. And for last year, 2023 in the city, we've seen primarily accidents are due to speed, and then secondary is people being distracted, whether it's following too closely, talking on their phone, not paying attention, not yielding right of way, things like that. Those are all considered to be caused by people being distracted. So as you mentioned, holding the phone definitely is one of the main contributors for that.
Mm-hmm.
And Jean, I just want to add to that, we are very serious about the distracted driving. In 2013, Officer Heather Munsterman, Andy will remember this, right after the law was passed in July of 2013, Heather was hit by a vehicle. The guy was on his phone, and she had to end up taking a disability retirement because of the injuries. So, internally that impacted us greatly because we lost one of our own to help work with us every day because of the injuries she suffered from that accident of the guy on his telephone. She was out on a traffic stop. So she was on a traffic stop speaking to another driver. Another guy came by on his phone, paying attention, swerved over, clipped her, put her, over top of the car.
Wow.
So it's personal for us. We want to bring it to people's attention.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. So regarding that, you said speeding was the biggest cause of accidents, and then the distracted driving and holding a phone. How are you as the police able to determine whether or not the person was distracted, and if they were in fact on a phone, aside from them just, I mean, did they just admit that they were on their phone?
Most of the time, yes. There's also, like any other scene, we'll question anybody that may have been involved, anybody that may still be remaining that's not involved in the accident directly, may have observed something that happened. So the officers will gather the witnesses and things and try to determine what happened by asking them. So a lot of times people do say, yes, I was on my phone. Of course, not everybody's going to admit that. We don't expect them to, but so we'll ask a series of questions. How fast were you going? Did you have your seatbelt on?
Mhm.
What happened? Were you holding the phone? Things like that. And they may say things, yes, I was, or I was calling somebody, or a witness may say, yes, they were on their phone and they were looking down and they swerved and struck the vehicle, something like that. So generally, I wouldn't say half the time, but close to that, people will say, yes, I was talking or I was calling somebody.
Okay. Now, are you finding that a lot of people don't know that they cannot have their phone in their hand at all while they're driving? Do a lot of people claim that they don't know that?
That is a standard response, and they'll say, or I was just calling somebody. I wasn't texting somebody. I was calling my friend or my mother or whoever it may be. I wasn't texting, so they may think that. Or another thing is, I was using my GPS to find where to go. I'm not from the area, something like that. So a lot of times people don't know that, and our officers are fairly good at educating the public on that.
Hmm. Now, what about if their phone is, up? I'm trying to do a picture here, like on the dash, and like assume it's not in my hand, but it's on the dash, and they're inputting something in there. Would that count as the phone in their hand while driving?
It does, yes, because they are manipulating the phone. Yes. So if
Okay.
it were, let's say, one of those stands or whatever you want to call it that are mounted to the windshield or
Mhm.
mounted to the console or something, if it's in there and it's being used for navigation or a phone call or something, and they're not manipulating it or touching it or inputting anything on it, then that is fine. Now, if they're watching a YouTube video or something, that's a whole other violation, which is another distraction. But using it as a guidance tool or using it as a phone, as a phone call, then it's fine.
Mm-hmm. No, I actually did fairly recently have somebody charged with what I think you're referencing. There's a statute that I wasn't aware of that prohibits watching or looking at a device that is transmitting TV waves or something similar to that. Is that what you're referencing?
Yes, that is.
So that particular case, the person was FaceTiming, but I guess you're saying that people sometimes watch YouTube videos while they're driving.
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. Sometimes if you're behind them and let's say it's dark outside and you can actually see inside the vehicle from behind them, you can see, oh, I know that's a new Netflix series or something like that. So clearly they're not paying attention to driving. They're looking at the video or at least listening to it.
Mm-hmm.
Entertaining themselves while they commute in this fine
Yeah.
Northern Virginia traffic, Gene.
Now, this does not apply to, I've actually had people ask me this. This does not apply to any screens that are positioned so that children in the back could be watching something while the parent is driving.
Right. That's correct.
Okay. So in my experience, so I think the texting law came out around 2015, something like that, which is different from the handheld device law. And that texting law is no longer on the books. And I guess if you all want to opine as to why, but I think I know why. So that law doesn't exist anymore. So now it doesn't matter if you're texting, doesn't matter what you're doing on your phone. If that phone is in your hand, if you're touching your phone while you're driving, you will be charged with that.
That's right. And the previous law that you referred to, you did have to be manipulating it. So you did have to be typing something in there or texting it or something like that. Now it's just plain holding the phone, just like you mentioned, is considered to be a violation.
And I think that might be partially because it would be hard to prove that somebody was actually inputting something into their phone. You're going to have a he said, she said kind of a thing with that. But yeah. But I mean, it doesn't matter if you're texting or not. I mean, you could be distracted, like turning on a podcast or anything.
Yeah, I think the law, if I remember correctly, Gene, when it came up in the General Assembly, a lot of these discussions were had, and I think our legislators have finally gotten to that point. They realized that it's simply the distraction that is causing the issues. It evolved to more than texting.
Right.
So they finally got on board with that and brought the law forward to change.
And have you seen any reduction in the amount of accidents since the new law has been in effect? Or is it too early to tell?
I think it's too early to tell exactly. I would say they're pretty even now if we were to take first glance. And the way the crash reports are set up, it's difficult to say specifically what was distracting the driver, unless they were to tell us that and the officer were to include that in a narrative format or something. But yeah, it's kind of too early to tell at this point.
Okay. So regarding the red light and speed, well, I guess we'll start with the speed enforcement cameras because a lot of people have been asking me about this. I'm just going to ask you guys to explain, because I know a little bit about it. If you could explain a little bit about the new speed enforcement cameras in Manassas City, where they're located, why they're there, what the penalties are if you're caught, things like that.
Sure. So in 2020, the state legislature passed a bill that allows localities to install speed cameras in active school zones and active work zones. So school year 2023-2024, so September of last year, we installed 4 portable speed cameras in the city in front of schools. So 3 of the school sites that we have are Dean Elementary on Wellington Road, Metz Middle School on Wellington Road, and lastly, Round Elementary on Hastings Drive. So the way the cameras work is that they are one directional, so they'll be facing one direction of traffic, and it's the receding traffic. So it'll pick up a vehicle as it's passing and driving away from the unit within the school zone. It measures speed, measures distance, all kinds of other things using laser technology. The way the law is that speed limit on those specific locations is 25 miles per hour. So the way that the law is written is that to use these speed cameras, a violation occurs if the vehicle is traveling 35 miles per hour or faster. So if a vehicle is going 35 or more during this specific enforcement time, and I'll get into that in a moment, then it is considered to be a violation. So the way that we enforce it is that the 30 minutes preceding school start time and then the 30 minutes after dismissal, those are the enforcement times. So per site, it's 1 hour per school day. And again, these are only active during school days and during the school year. So let's say July, June, and early August, they're not going to be active. So there will be no violations. If somebody were to receive a ticket, the ticket is mailed to the registered owner of the vehicle. So if it's my vehicle, for instance, and I'm driving 36 miles per hour across Wellington Road in front of Metz Elementary during the enforcement period, I'll get that citation in the mail. It's a $100 fine. That is what the state legislature set. There's no other fees that can be added to it. So there's no court costs. There's no late fees, nothing like that. I can do one of 2 things. I can choose to pay the ticket. If I agree with it, I can pay that $100, send it in accordance with the instructions that are on there. Or if I want to, I can go to court and contest it. And then there's instructions on there that are pretty clear about what to do if you want to do that. Alternatively, as I mentioned before, the ticket is sent to the registered owner. So if I wasn't the driver at the time, let's say I let my friend borrow the vehicle and I know it wasn't me, there's also another section I can fill out there, have it notarized, send it to the address listed, and the ticket will be administratively voided. So basically, the person will not be responsible for it. This is a civil penalty. So unlike being stopped by the police at the roadside, being issued a Virginia uniform summons or a citation that I have to sign and appear in court if I choose to, this is a civil violation. So there's no demerit points on my license. There is no reporting to insurance, nothing like that. And there's no other fee. So as I mentioned before, court costs. So if I were to go to court with a ticket issued by a police officer on the roadside, there will be maybe sometimes upwards of $100 additional court costs added onto there. So this does not apply to these type of tickets.
Okay.
So Gene, the best way I've described it to our public is treat them like a parking ticket. There's no points or association to you as a person. And then the locations that Andy pointed out, or Lieutenant Brooks pointed out, those 3 schools, if you close your eyes and picture, those 3 schools are also on 4-lane roads. So we've had consistent complaints about speeders during school zones through those 3 school areas, and that's the reason we targeted those areas, because of the amount of complaints we get.
Hmm. What about accidents in those areas? Were there a lot of accidents during school time at all?
Primarily, no. So no, as far as accidents involving pedestrians, no, there were not. But as Chief referred to earlier, a lot of complaints about speeding, not only from the citizens, but also from crossing guards,
Mhm.
the motorcycle officers that were out there. They could pull a car over and see another vehicle driving by them as they're issuing a ticket very fast. So they could stand there, maybe issue 5 to 6 tickets within that 30-minute window and still see people that are clearly driving faster than the speed limit past them while they're issuing those tickets. And also, the vendor that we're using, they did do speed studies at those locations and found that the number of violations certainly matched the concerns that we were hearing, and then
Mhm.
what our officers were seeing as far as tickets being issued by police at those scenes. So certainly indicated that this was necessary in those positions.
Yeah, that's an important component both for photo red light and the speed enforcement, Gene, is the analysis that goes in before these are actually approved. We do some engineering, sightline, a prelim of how many violations we think are going on, so we can put all of that analysis in there, and actually we need to justify what we're doing. And
Mhm.
so that's worked out well when we explain that to the public as well. And you talked about accidents with pedestrians. That's what we're trying to prevent. Our goal is to get 100% compliance, because one kid hit, you can't put a price on that, right? So we're trying to gain compliance. We put it out there. We did a 30-day warning period. We did a social media blast,
Mhm.
news media blast, letting everybody know these are out there,
Mhm.
trying to make sure the public is aware. We need you to slow down.
Mhm. So I did see the Facebook post about it, and I actually shared it on my business page and my personal page. So you did warn people. But so you mentioned 3 schools. I thought I saw, maybe I'm confused. I thought I saw something new up near Osborne High School. Maybe that's just that's not a speed camera, is it?
No, that's just a visual speed display. So that's
Okay.
usually if we're doing a speed study in that area. So we'll put a sign out that
Okay.
says this is your speed, just to remind people,
Mhm.
usually in response to a citizen concern or higher accident rates or something. I'm not saying that that's what happened here at this specific location, but we have a device that we can also measure traffic volume, average speed, things like that. So
Oh,
that's
okay.
what we're doing at that location at the moment.
I will tell you, I live near that location, so during, when schools, more so in the morning, I see it than the afternoon because my schedule's just crazy. Yeah, there's a lot of crazy driving,
Mm,
people coming to the school and people just passing down Main Street. So yeah, maybe we'll have a camera there one day.
maybe so.
Um, so is there anything else that we need to talk about with the speed enforcement cameras? I feel like I may have breezed past it. So it's like a parking violation. It's a fine of $100. There's no points on your license. I assume it's not going to go on your driving transcript, so your insurance is not going to find out about it. And so I guess, to summarize, if I may, the goal is not it, it it's to reduce the speeding and reduce the danger and reduce the potential of accidents, not necessarily, punish people by, putting points and stuff on their license, right?
That's right. And I think it's important to note too that the school zones have those yellow flashing lights that say school zone. So when the zone is active and there's students crossing, buses in and out of there, it's highly congested. Motorists know that it is an active school zone as well. So I think it's important to note that fact too.
Hmm. Oh, and
Yeah,
also you mentioned it's before and out. It's before school, and then when school's letting out, right? So it's
Right.
it's only during the times where you're going to have the majority of students and adults, people walking around, driving. Yeah, so
That's
not.
right. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and on Wellington Road in front of Dean, we have the flashing yellow sign, the photo enforced sign, and then we added the actual times that it is going on to the sign as well. So again, as people have brought up concerns, we've tried to address them to say, we have as much notice as we can possibly put there
Mm-hmm.
that this is coming up in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's flashing. They see there are posted speed limit signs. Even if there weren't, they shouldn't be driving that fast when school's letting out. But anything else about the speed cameras before I move on to my next set of questions?
Nope, I think we hit all the points.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lieutenant Brooks. It was great having you on here. You're able to hit everything, so I didn't even have to ask a lot of questions. So I want to touch briefly on the red light cameras because people also ask me about that too. So that's been around for a little while, but people still seem to not know what the deal is with the red light cameras. So is it exactly the same as the speed enforcement cameras? Can you kind of explain the deal with those and whether that shows up on your driving transcript and points and all that stuff?
Sure, some of the aspects are quite similar. So we have them in the city in 4 locations: Centerville, Liberia, Euclid, Liberia, Signal Hill. And then the most recent intersection is Center Street at Grant Avenue. And not all those intersections have a camera on each of the 4 approaches. Similar to the speed camera, there was a study done by the engineers and the vendor about how many violations there were at each approach. And then we provided the number of accidents. There was an engineering analysis done by a third-party engineering firm that was then reviewed by our internal city engineers to determine whether or not these were necessary. So we're not arbitrarily going to every intersection and saying, let's put 1 camera in each approach. We're being kind of smart as far as deploying them where they're going to be more efficient and effective. And the overall goal, again, is to reduce violations and reduce accidents. So if somebody does receive a red light violation there, it's $50. Just like the speed violations, there's no demerit points on your license. It's not reported to the DMV, so it's not on your transcript. So there are no insurance ramifications for the owner. The citations are again sent to the registered owner. So if somebody were to receive a citation notice and they weren't the driver, they can fill out the information. If they choose to go to court, they can do so. And just like the fine with the speed camera, there are no other fees added. There's no late fees. There's no court costs that can be added, nothing like that. So it's a straight $50 regardless of whether they want to go to court, whether they pay it, things like that. One question that we have gotten a lot is, can I turn right on red? I got a violation. I turned right and I still got a ticket. And there's no sign there that says that I cannot turn right on red. So the answer is yes, you can turn right on red. However, you have to stop, just like a stop sign. So the law specifically says for a intersection controlled by a traffic signals that if it is red, unless there's a sign posted that prohibits it, you can turn right. You just have to stop. So we tell people, treat it just like a stop sign. Make sure that it's safe to proceed. Once you stop completely before entering the intersection, you can make that right turn. So we have a lot of questions about that. Yeah, I think
I'm sorry. I was just going to, the right turn. I'm only smiling, Gene, because of the questions that I get. I think the right turn on red is the one that I get a lot of emails or calls about, both from all the way down friends and family. Hey, I got this, but I stopped. And the good thing about the photo red light program, it will also tell you how fast you were going when you went through the intersection. So I usually go, well, let's pull the ticket up and look at it. Well, you didn't stop. You actually went through the intersection, watched the video. You went through at 17 miles per hour. That's not even close to stopping. And usually after I get them to actually look at the data that they have access to, they pay their ticket.
So is that available for them? Like if you send them a link, they can see the video, or they have to come into the station?
Yeah. So when they receive the violation in the mail, they'll, on the top right-hand corner, it'll have a web address with a PIN number that they can enter to be able to view. They can view the video, they can view the citation online, and they can decide to pay it if they want to online or or just review it. But yeah, the video will be there, and it has all the information. This is the speed, this is the location. You can see exactly what the officer saw whenever they reviewed the video.
I think that review is the other important component. It goes through multiple layers, Gene, of approval with the final. So the vendor screens it first. I think they do it twice, right, Andy?
They do, yes.
Yeah, it goes through two levels of view by the vendor. Then it has to be approved and certified by a sworn law enforcement officer that gives the final approval, which is how the ticket is actually issued. So 3 people have looked at this before you get your ticket.
And would you say that more people are complying and paying it, or more people than not calling and challenging it or questioning it?
I would say more are complying and paying it. There's about a 75% initial payment rate within the first notice. So that's within the first 30 days. Most of the people that question it, they'll call and they'll speak with the customer service center at the with the vendor, which is standard. And then if they can't resolve the issue, they'll refer them to us. And we'll get a handful of calls a week about that. And generally after we explain that, they agree with it. And a lot of people, at least the initial phase of this, we saw that they were coming to court not knowing that there was a video. So they said, I definitely stopped. I would never run a red light. And then we play the video in court and they say, oh yeah, whoops, sorry. So a lot of initial confusion, but very, very small amount. I would say just a handful, maybe 5 or so a month will do that.
I think if we, and Gene, I apologize if I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but as we've reviewed this case because we're in the payment mode, in my opinion, if there's a change to the law, it needs to be for the unpaid tickets. So, it goes to the owner of the vehicle, not the driver. So there needs to be some kind of, and we use the word accountability. Maybe they can't register the vehicle until these are resolved. But before Lieutenant Brooks took over, had another lieutenant in that position. We had one vehicle that had 23 violations. I think it was in the 20s at the same intersection. And every morning he ran the red light to go to work. But his car was registered somewhere else. So he wasn't even getting the tickets, but there's no recourse for those unpaid tickets. I think the state, as we move forward, I would like to see the General Assembly make a change there so there can be some kind of accountability for unpaid tickets.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I didn't specifically ask, but I'm the accountability for, if you're pulled over for speeding and you're convicted of speeding, you're going to have points on your license. It's going to be on your transcript. Your insurance is going to see it. So even if you fail to pay it, there are still going to be penalties. So yeah, I was thinking about that, and I mean, I think you're right, because it would be kind of toothless if there was nothing you could do to really enforce it.
Yeah. So the driver, in your case where we're issued a ticket, you don't pay the ticket. Ultimately, your license could be suspended or revoked, right, for unpaid tickets. In this case,
actually, they can't suspend your license anymore for unpaid fines.
See, I'm aging myself. It's been a long time since I've issued tickets, but there needs to be some kind of accountability to that. Let's put it as let's reverse it and say the vehicles are registered to a corporation. Now, Doug's trunking company has 30 some unpaid violations. What do we do with that? He just refuses to pay them.
Right. What do you do?
No, we don't do much, because trying to collect that is cost more in the fees to try to put it in collection in staff time than it is to go get the tickets. So I think that's a loophole. We've talked at the General Assembly. This wasn't the year to do it. Hopefully, as things settle down in Richmond in the future, we'll be able to get that changed a little bit. And I
Well,
think the simple solution is you don't let them update the registration to that vehicle.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I would think that would be but then the DMV would, yeah. So yeah, there are issues. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I was going to ask a question. Now I can't remember. Um, so, I mean, there are loopholes, but conceivably, I, I mean, you can pursue them and take them to collections. I mean, that is an avenue. So it's not,
It
I
is.
think people would assume that, anything unpaid could go to collections, right?
It's just not worth it.
I know.
So yeah,
Well, you bring them in big batches. You pay an attorney to go to court one time with all of them.
that's true.
I'm sorry, I'm not gonna not my place. But we all see it. We all see, I look over in traffic and there's people on their phone, clear as day, right
Yeah.
in front of them. Generally, the people when I notice somebody driving what I think erratically or too slow, I see them on their phone. But it can
Yeah.
go the opposite way, and that's still not good. I mean, like, just because you're driving slower doesn't mean you can't cause an accident. But we all see this all the time, so it's a problem. And I mean, the fact that they're just getting a fine should show them that the city or the Commonwealth or whomever the entity is not just trying to collect money for no reason. It's for a good reason. So.
Yeah, I think anyone listening, or the three of us, we see it daily. And whether you're commuting to work or running to the store, I would say the percentage is great that you will see someone holding and manipulating their phone or doing something with it.
Or they're
And
going like this.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we've taught them to lay it in their lap so nobody can see it, right? So they keep it down low. But I'm going to agree 100% with you. As soon as I see someone driving erratic or very slow, you get up beside them. Yeah, they're on their phone doing something. Yeah,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I was going to ask something else. I should write these down.
I should be quiet and let you think. That's what.
No, that's okay. I just keep thinking more questions based on what you're saying. Well, one question that I had was, since the red light enforcement cameras have been around for a few years, have you? Oh, so to preface that, Chief Keen was on my live, I think last April during Distracted Driving Awareness Month, and I remember we were talking about this, and I think you had said that the intersections wherein these were placed were the intersections with the most accidents. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is it too soon to tell, or have you noticed a reduction in accidents since these cameras were put in place?
Yes.
The red light enforcement?
So after review, after the first year these cameras were in, so 1 year after installation, now they were staggered. So Centerville and Liberia was first, and then up the Liberia corridor all the way to Signal Hill. They were put in there in a staggered fashion. And then just last year, about this time of year, the Grant and Center one was put in. So that one we don't know just yet, but the other ones, within 1 year of installation, accidents in general were reduced by about 70%, which is very
70%?
significant. Yes, 70%.
Wow.
Very significant. Now, since then, they have remained steady. So the accidents have not gone up again, but they also haven't really gone down from that initial drop. So they've remained at that level. Whatever 70% less is, they've remained steady over the last couple of years at those locations. Unfortunately, Centerville and Liberia still is the top crash location intersection in the city. However, there were only, if I remember correctly, last year, 13 reportable accidents at that location. So for your viewers, reportable is anything that results in injury or damage $1,500 or greater. So that's still a very low number considering the amount of traffic that goes through that intersection every day.
Right.
And it shows we've reduced the seriousness of the accident.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that high impact, we've reduced that high impact crash.
So, okay. So the red light enforcement cameras have reduced the number, not only the number of crashes, but also the number of high impact crashes.
Right.
Okay. Well, that's good.
It is.
70%. I mean, that's huge. I mean, to me.
Yeah, it was to us as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
and as you can imagine, as Lieutenant Brooks talked about, that Liberia corridor is our busiest roadway with the most traffic. So um, that's usually where the most accidents occurred at. So that's where our studies began at.
mhm, mhm, mhm. Well, so hopefully the speed enforcement cameras will be doing the same thing. And I wanted to actually point out to everybody because I'm just assuming that everybody knows what the penalties for speeding ticket convictions are. I should have had my book. I wrote a book on consequences of speeding tickets. So I just assume that everybody knows. But if you're pulled over by an officer in the Commonwealth of Virginia for speeding and you are convicted of speeding at any speed or reckless driving, you are going to have points on your license, and the points are based on the speed at which you were convicted of traveling. If you get too many points in a short period of time, the DMV will suspend your license. People do need to take it seriously. So that's the difference between being pulled over by an officer for speeding and these speed enforcement cameras in terms of the penalties. So when we're talking about there aren't a lot of penalties, it's just a fine. That really is just a fine. Like the insurance companies are not going to. Insurance companies will find anything that goes on your DMV transcript. I'm not talking to you two, to the viewers. Anything that goes on your DMV transcript, your insurance company will eventually find out about. The fewer convictions you have, obviously, the better, but they will see anything on there. And if you have had a lot of problems over the years, or people in your family, teenage drivers have problems, one thing could push you over the edge. That's an important thing to keep in mind too. And I just wanted to let everybody know that. And then also reckless driving, which, we can talk about if you want, but that's a crime. And a lot of people don't know that that's a crime, going 20 miles per hour over more than 85, but there's nowhere in Manassas City they should be going 85
Not
or
at all.
more than 20 over. Do
Well,
you
you'll be
actually like more than 20 over the limit?
well, what we've started doing is some of that early morning enforcement. Andy will know the numbers, but or maybe reflect roughly. But we've written a couple tickets for doing 70 some miles per hour on some of these roads. The Godwin area, Sudley Road, 28. That 5 o'clock in the morning, man, you get people commuting, and we've written some very high speed tickets the last year.
Wow.
Yeah. There's nowhere in Manassas you should be doing 70 miles an hour.
I agree. Why the last year? Is that going up? Is that a trend that's going up?
It's about us having the ability to have staff out there doing it
Okay.
at that time in the morning. So
Okay.
that's the other thing. Lieutenant Brooks' unit, that traffic unit, as our staffing numbers went down the last 18 months, the first people we pull from is that traffic enforcement unit and put them back on shift so they can answer calls for service. So he's supposed to have 5 people. He was down to 2 people. So that impacts him greatly. And then our night shift people began to do some early morning enforcement before they left at 6:30. At that 5 o'clock, they started going out and doing some enforcement and catching some.
Mhm. Well, that makes sense. And that actually reminds me of a question I was going to ask earlier. So the red light enforcement cameras and the speed enforcement cameras, does having those in place allow you to, have your officers doing other things, like you said, being able to respond to calls for service instead of having to sit in an intersection and wait for people speeding?
Absolutely. So, like I said earlier, I think I talked about Round Elementary, how an officer would be there during the school crossing time and write maybe 5 tickets. Instead of having to be there, that officer can spend that 30 minutes elsewhere, responding to calls for service, addressing other traffic complaints, things like that. So, yeah, absolutely, it is a force multiplier for sure.
Okay. So, in a lot of ways, it's good because it frees up your officers to just be able to do anything else that people in the city need, instead of
Right.
just sitting at an intersection when a camera can do, the same, not the same job because they're just getting a fine, but can still hopefully cut down on the number of people that are speeding through that area and causing a danger.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and there's some under the belief that using the AI technology reduces those interactions between the police and the public that could go bad as well. So that confrontational interaction you could have. So it also, there's some that believe that's a good thing, that it reduces those confrontations. Although we, take a little bit of pride in Manassas that we treat people respectfully and professionally, and we know how to handle those situations.
I did get a question in the comments. What are the plans for future cameras in the city, and does the department take suggestions?
So as far as the photo red light goes, we did identify those top intersections, the top 10 intersections in the city that have the highest crash rates. So those are the areas that we're focusing on. We are about to work on a second phase installation here in the next coming months of other locations that require, or we think that meet the standard for enforcement. So as far as photo red light, yes, and we do base it initially on the crash rates. And again, as I mentioned before, we'll take into account violation rates, the ability of an officer to be able to safely park on the side of the road, observe the violation, get out into traffic, and catch up to the violator, which is a huge thing, especially with the intersections that we've already talked about. Think about Liberia and Centerville. It's almost impossible to safely do that. And then we'll have engineering analysis, and then the final step is the city engineer approving or disapproving that. So as far as photo red light goes, yes. For speed enforcement, not at the moment. Chief King talked about the roadways, the 4 lanes of traffic, and the active the active school zones, plus the volume of traffic. There's not really any school at the moment that really would meet that criteria.
But I guess just essentially it would be, because he asked if you take suggestions, if you're having a lot of people complaining about speeding or a certain type of traffic infraction in a certain area, then you would look into, doing a study there and seeing if you needed to do that.
Absolutely. So part of our standard approach, so for any traffic concern, let's just use Main Street since we talked about it earlier. We can use Main Street. There's speeding on Main Street. So we'll go out there, we'll do a speed study, which measures average speeds, it measures traffic volume, it measures the hour when a certain speed is met. So let's say there's a car that goes down there at 50 miles per hour at 3 p.m. and then at 7 a.m. or something. Then we can direct more enforcement towards that location at those specific times. And then we'll do a whole speed study and then bring it forth to the city and maybe propose something. So we do. So any concern or complaint that we get from the public, we do track and we do treat it as if we're going to evaluate any further needs there, if that makes any sense. So we're not just focused on only enforcement. So we're not going to say, oh, there's a speeding complaint on Main Street, officers go out there and do enforcement. We're actually going to take a more holistic approach and kind of see what the problem exactly is. Is it education? Is it signage? Is it something else that maybe we can resolve? Is it an engineering issue that we can fix other than just throwing officers out there and saying, please enforce this?
Okay. Well, so we talked a lot about the cameras, and the speed enforcement cameras around the 3 schools, the red light enforcement cameras. We started talking about distracted driving and the handheld communication law. Is there anything else from your perspective that you think we should talk about, whether it's in regards to why am I tripping on these words? Distracted driving, or anything else that you see as police officers, whether it's traffic related or not? Anything else you want to discuss?
Well, from our perspective, I say we discussed most of it. I know speed is always one of the primary factors in crashes. It's counted for about 20% of our citations issued last year. So, speed's always a factor, and we can't have police officers everywhere, but we try to get to all those locations. So, I think we talked about it for the most part. But again, if the community has a concern, please bring it to our attention, and we'll certainly reach out to you, and we can try to figure out how to resolve the issue.
And Chief and Lieutenant, who would be the best person in the department for people to reach out to if they have a question or concern?
So for traffic issues, they can reach out to me directly. abrooks@manassasva.gov is my email address.
I'll put that in there. abrooks@manassasva.gov.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I can reach out to them. We can discuss the exact issues or specific concerns that there are.
Well, I could keep asking a bunch of questions, but we've already been on for 45 minutes now. And Chief, last time when you and I talked, we touched on a bunch of different things and mentioned that we could maybe have a live devoted to specific things. Like you talked about programs you had at the department, and I think things going on with teenage girls or something like that. But I'm not going to get into that now. So
Well,
I'll just leave it with, I would love to have you guys back on again, because I've had a lot of engagement. People were actually texting me that were listening to this and watching this. So a lot of people actually are watching this. So it's I think a really good thing that we did this. So I appreciate your time.
yeah, Gene, let's maybe we connect one day. We talk about some of the other, I'm going to call them community services style programs, especially with, as you mentioned, Girls on the Run. We're involved with young
Yes.
girls, the opiate reaction to things.
Mm-hmm.
All of that comes out of community services. So give us a chance to get that information out to the public, and maybe give them some resources they could reach out to. But you and I see each other. We can talk about that offline.
Okay. All right. Well, it sounds good. So I guess all of you watching, we can hopefully see Chief Keen again and Lieutenant Brooks. Thank you both very much for your time. I'm just going to say before I end this live stream that once I hit end stream, you and I will still be here so we can chat. So don't hop off quite yet, but I will let you go soon. So thank you guys again, and thank you everybody for watching and your questions. And I will see you on my next live. Bye.